The officer corps of the Janissary was not separate from the other ranks, and there was no separate officer training school or training corps. Except for the post of the Janissary Arsa and the Sekbanbaşı, all military officers commissioned from within the membership of the corps. Each regiment trained and selected its own officers within the regiment, according to seniority, merit, and courage, so in theory. Except for the post of Corbaci, which meant regiment commanders, all officer positions within the regiment were allocated only to the members of the regiment. In case of any vacancy, that position would most likely be filled by promoting the next ranking senior person. One of the most bizarre aspects of the Janissaries was the naming of titles for its officer corps. Most of the junior and middle ranking Janissary officer titles were closely related with kitchen terminology, such as naming regiment commanders as Corbaci, Soupmaker, quartermaster officers as Ascibasi, chief cooks, or lieutenants as Odabasi, chief of chamber. This was due not because officers spent more time supervising food supply than leading in war, but rather to the revered status of the regimental cauldrons. Let's now look at the Janissary ranks. At the bottom we have, as I like to call them, the two training ranks, the recruit. Here the newly recruited boys are shown wearing all red with a simple Janissary red cap, along with one bag of personal possessions. After this, the Janissary recruit of the Devşirme system would move up to the Avcemi Olan, which was the next stage in the process where he would continue his training into a spot opened up in the vertical hierarchy of the corps. After these, you have the ordinary Yoldaş, or the Janissary soldier, who was sometimes called the Nefel soldier, was placed into three ranks: the Eskinci, or campaigner, who did the bulk of the fighting, who would later become an Amelimanda, or veteran, and then an Oturak, or the pensioner, who was not required to fight and was permitted to enter a trade and marry. The next rank up was the Çavuş, or sometimes called the Karakulukçu, also known in English as the scullion, roughly equal to a sergeant. Above him was the Baş Karakulukçu, or head scullion. Next in rank was the Imam, or priest of the regiment, followed by the standard bearer, and then the Vekil Harç, or the quartermaster. Next came the Odabasi, lieutenant, or in English known as the chief of the chamber, who was literally the chief of the tent that him and his soldiers slept in. Then came the Ascibasi, or chief cook, who was the quartermaster, and also had a few cooks under him, and above him was a Corbaci, or the Soupmaker, who was the regiment commander. Now, if a Janissary wanted to rise higher, this was where things get confusing. Since you had various regiments, each regiment had a particular leader, the Corbaci. However, ranks were based on a mix of prestige and on control in multiple regiments. After promotion to regimental command, an officer looked forward to an opening in the prestigious super-regimental level of posts called the Katar Ağaları, commanders of the convoy. On the very top of this was the Janissary R, who commanded 64 regiments, who was then followed by the Sekbanbaşı, who commanded 32 regiments, followed by the Kul Kahyası, who commanded the 1st Regiment and the Bostancı Palace Guards, the Zarcıbaşı, who commanded the Janissaries' only lanced armed cavalry regiments, the Solakbaşı, who was promoted from the Janissary Corps in charge of the elite left-handed guard, then the Samsuncubaşı, head of the massive keeper regiments, also known as the 71st. The Turnacıbaşı was the head of the 73rd Regiment. The 94th was commanded by the Chief Imam, and the 99th commanded by the leader of the Bektashi orders. Finally, the 101st, commanded by the Beytul Malcı, or the Chief Treasurer of the Janissary Corps. All these ranks I listed here were part of the Cemaat Ortas, and each one was as equal to the other in terms of rank and prestige. The only advantage the Janissary Ağa had over the Sekbanbaşı was that he commanded a larger regimental size. Under the Janissary Ağa, the regiments also had distinctive regimental leaders. The 5th was commanded by the Başçavuş, who was the assisted the Ağa in his duties. The 19th, commanded by the Bekçis, was the army guard on the campaigns, who guarded the camps. The 28th was commanded by the Muzir Ağa, or summoner of the Janissaries. The 32nd was commanded by the Deputy Kahya to the 1st Regiment, and the 54th, who was commanded by the Director of Training. The commander of the 56th of the Ala Bölükleri was a 60-man strong Harbaci Regiment, or Halberdier Regiment, guarding palace gates around Istanbul, and the Grand Vizier's tent. The commander of the 56th Regiment. The 56th Regiment was commanded by the Harbaci Basha. He commanded a 60-man strong Halberdier Regiment, who guarded palace gates and the Grand Vizier's tent on campaigns. The Sekban Basha led 32 regiments, which included the 33rd led by the Abju Basha, or lead huntsman of the Sultan.